The ship came down from the sky on a Tuesday morning. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built. Its surface looked like black glass mixed with flowing silver, and it blocked out the sun over Geneva for 3 hours as it slowly descended. Military jets circled it like confused birds, their weapons useless against something so vast and strange. People around the world stopped what they were doing. They watched on their phones, on television screens, on giant displays in city squares. Some prayed. Some cried. Some simply stared with their mouths open, unable to understand what they were seeing. The ship landed in a field outside the city, crushing trees and farmland beneath its impossible weight. For 6 hours, nothing happened. The world held its breath. Then a door opened in the side of the vessel, and the first alien to ever visit Earth stepped onto the grass-dot ambassador. Kethvora was tall and thin, with skin like polished black stone and veins of silver light running beneath the surface. Its eyes were large and golden, without pupils, and they seemed to look at everything and nothing at the same time. It moved with a strange grace, as if gravity affected it differently than humans thought. Behind it came 20 more beings of different shapes and sizes. Some looked almost human. Others had too many limbs, or no limbs at all. They were the Valorian hegemony's diplomatic team, and they had come to deliver a message. Secretary General Elena Vasquez met them in a hastily prepared conference room. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but she carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who had seen many crises in her long career. Beside her sat generals, scientists, and world leaders from every major nation. Humanity had put aside its differences for this moment. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Kethvora spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Translation devices turned its words into English, but the meaning was clear in any language. "I speak for the Valorian hegemony," the ambassador said. "We have ruled this galaxy for 11,000 of your years. We have brought 4,000 species under our protection. We have ended wars, cured diseases, and created peace across more worlds than your minds can imagine. We are not cruel. We are not evil. We are simply inevitable." The room was silent. Vasquez kept her face still, showing nothing. "We have watched your species for some time," Kethvora continued. "You are young. You are violent. You are chaotic. But you have potential. Under our guidance, you could become something greater. You could join a civilization that spans the stars." "And if we refuse?" Vasquez asked. Her voice was calm and steady. Kethvora's golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. "No species has ever refused. Those who tried no longer exist. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships cannot leave your own solar system. Your entire military force would not last one rotation against a single hegemony patrol vessel. Resistance is not just foolish. It is mathematically impossible." The ambassador reached into its robes and produced a small crystal that floated in the air between them. Images appeared above it, showing planets burning, cities crumbling, species being reduced to nothing but ash and memory. "This is what refusal looks like," Kethvora said. "We do not enjoy destruction. We find it wasteful, but we will not allow chaos to spread through our domain. You have 30 of your solar cycles to accept our terms. Surrender your weapons. Surrender your governments. Accept client status within the hegemony. Your people will be relocated to designated zones. Your culture will be preserved in our archives. Your future will be managed by our algorithms. This is not punishment. This is mercy." The crystal vanished. Kethvora stood waiting, as if expecting immediate agreement. For a long moment, no one spoke. The world leaders looked at each other with pale faces. The generals gripped the edge of the table until their knuckles turned white. The scientists stared at their datapads, running calculations they already knew would show hopeless odds. Then Elena Vasquez did something unexpected. She laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a crazy laugh. It was the genuine laugh of someone who had just heard a very good joke. The sound echoed through the silent room, and everyone stared at her as if she had lost her mind. Kethvara tilted its head, confused. In 4,000 conquests, no species had ever laughed at the ultimatum. "Forgive me," Vasquez said, still smiling. "It is just, you came all this way. You brought your beautiful ship and your powerful words. You showed us images of death and destruction. And you expected us to simply agree? Your alternative is extinction," Kethvara said. "All rational beings choose survival." "Ah," Vasquez said, leaning forward. "There is your mistake, Ambassador. You assumed we were rational." She pressed a button on the table, and a large screen lit up on the wall behind her. It showed images of human history, of battles and wars, of people fighting against impossible odds. "Before we give you our answer," Vasquez said, "we would like to give you a gift. A lesson, really, about who we are and where we come from. You say no species has ever refused you, but you have never met a species like us." She gestured to the screen, where footage of ancient battles began to play. "We call ourselves humanity," she said, "and we have been practicing for this moment since before we could write. You want our surrender? You will need to speak with our historians first. They have stories you should hear. Stories about what happens when humans are told to kneel." Kethvara watched the screen with its golden eyes. Something flickered in those alien depths, something that might have been the beginning of doubt. "We have 30 days, you say," Vasquez continued. "That is more than enough time for you to learn. And when you have learned, you will understand why your ultimatum is not an offer we can accept. Not because we are brave, not because we are strong, but because surrender is simply not something we know how to do." The meeting ended with no agreement. The aliens returned to their ship, and humanity began to prepare, not for surrender, but for the greatest gamble in the history of their species. The countdown had begun. The broadcast began on the third day after the aliens arrived. Every television channel, every radio station, every streaming service on Earth carried the same signal. It was sent into space on every frequency humanity could produce, aimed directly at the hegemony vessel floating above Geneva. They called it the human way of war. Ambassador Kethvara sat in its quarters aboard the diplomatic ship, watching the transmission with growing confusion. The hegemony's psychological analysts sat beside it, their instruments measuring and recording everything. They had studied thousands of species. They had perfect models for predicting behavior, but nothing in their databases prepared them for what they were seeing. The first episode showed a city called Stalingrad. The images were old and grainy, recorded nearly a century before, but the horror was still clear. Humans fought other humans in frozen streets filled with rubble. They killed each other with guns, with knives, with their bare hands. They starved and froze and died by the millions. And they did not stop. They did not surrender. They fought for every building, every room, every inch of frozen ground. The defenders ate rats, the narrator explained. When the rats were gone, they ate leather. When the leather was gone, they ate the bodies of the fallen. They lost over 1 million soldiers. And still they did not surrender, because surrender meant slavery, and slavery was worse than death. Kethvara turned to its analysts. "Explain this," it demanded. The analysts could not explain it. Their models showed that any rational species would surrender when faced with certain defeat. Preserving the population was always the logical choice. But these humans had chosen death in massive numbers rather than accept occupation. The second episode showed a place called Vietnam. Here, farmers with simple weapons fought against the most powerful military on their planet. They dug tunnels with their hands. They made traps from sharpened sticks. They died by the hundreds of thousands over many years. And in the end, they won. The great power went home in defeat, broken by people who refused to stop fighting. They had no navy, the narrator said. They had no air force. They had no technology that could match their enemy. But they had patience. They had will. And they had something their enemy did not understand. The absolute certainty that they would rather die free than live as subjects. The third episode showed the Warsaw Ghetto, where people trapped behind walls rose up against their captors with pistols and bottles filled with fire. They knew they could not win. They knew they would all die. And they fought anyway, because dying on their feet meant something. Because the act of resistance itself was a kind of victory. They held out for almost a month, the narrator explained. Longer than some entire nations. Not because they thought they could survive, but because they refused to go quietly. They refused to give their killers an easy victory. Kethvara watched episode after episode. The Spartans at Thermopylae, 300 warriors holding a pass against an army of millions. The fortress of Masada, where 1,000 people chose mass death over capture. The crew of ships going down with guns still firing, refusing rescue because abandoning the fight was unthinkable. The hegemony analysts ran their calculations again and again. The results made no sense. These humans were clearly intelligent. They could see that resistance was hopeless. They could count the dead and understand the mathematics of defeat. And yet they fought anyway. They died anyway. Generation after generation, across all their cultures and all their history, they chose death over submission. This is not rational, one analyst said. This is a species-wide mental disorder. No, Kethvara said slowly, beginning to understand. This is something else. This is what they are. This is what evolution made them. The final episode of the broadcast featured a human general named Chen Wei. He was an old man with white hair and calm eyes. And he spoke directly to the camera as if he could see through space and time to reach Kethvara personally. You misunderstand us, General Chen said. We know we cannot defeat you. We have seen your ships. We have analyzed your weapons. We understand that in any direct fight we will lose. And we do not care. He paused, letting the words sink in. You see, Ambassador, we are not brave. Brave people feel fear and overcome it. We are something different. We are a species that has spent our entire existence fighting against impossible odds. We have fought ice ages, plagues, famines, and each other. We have stared into the face of extinction so many times that it has become familiar. We are not afraid of death. We are afraid of living without freedom. We are afraid of seeing our children grow up as slaves. We are afraid of surrendering our future to algorithms that do not love what we love. General Chen leaned closer to the camera. Surrender is not in our operating parameters, he said. It is not a choice we are capable of making. You can kill us, Ambassador. You can burn our cities and poison our world and wipe our species from the universe. But you cannot make us kneel, because we do not know how. The broadcast ended. Kethvara sat in silence for a long time. The hegemony had conquered 4,000 species across 3 galaxies. Every single one of them had understood the logic of submission. When faced with overwhelming force, they had calculated the odds, considered their options, and chosen survival. It was the rational response. It was the only response that made sense. But these humans were not rational. They were something the hegemony had never encountered before. A species that valued freedom more than existence. A species that had built its entire civilization on the principle that some things were worth dying for. Kethvara called for an emergency meeting of the War Council. For the first time in 11,000 years, the hegemony faced a question it did not know how to answer. What do you do with a species that would rather burn than kneel? On the 15th day, humanity revealed its countermeasure. The broadcast came from a military base deep underground, where Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood before a wall of screens showing star maps, trajectories, and weapon systems. She was a small woman with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. Behind her stood the leaders of every military force on Earth, united for the first and possibly last time. Ambassador Kefvara, Admiral Tanaka began. We have watched your demonstrations of power. We have seen what your weapons can do. We have calculated the odds, and we agree with your assessment. In a direct war, we cannot win. Our ships are slow. Our weapons are primitive. Our shields would not stop your weakest attacks. You are correct. We are no match for you. She paused and smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. But we have been preparing for this moment for 60 years. Since the first signal from space reached our world, we knew that someday someone would come. Someone with greater technology. Someone who would demand our surrender. And we asked ourselves a simple question. If we cannot win, how can we make sure our enemy does not win either? The screens behind her lit up with new images. Ships, thousands of them, small and fast and already moving through the darkness between stars. 30 years ago, we began launching sleeper vessels, Admiral Tanaka explained. They carry no weapons. They carry something more important. Genetic archives of every human being, seeds of every plant, embryos of every animal, and manufacturing equipment to rebuild our civilization. They are traveling in every direction, at speeds your sensors cannot easily detect. Even if you destroy Earth completely, humanity will survive. Somewhere, somehow, our children will grow up free. Kefvara, watching from the diplomatic vessel, felt the first true unease it had experienced in centuries. But survival is not enough for us, Admiral Tanaka continued. We are not a species that runs and hides. We are a species that fights. And so we developed something we call the Supreme Cosmic War Doctrine. It is very simple, Ambassador. If you attack us, we will attack you. Not to win. To hurt you so badly that you will spend the next 1,000 years wishing you had left us alone. The screens changed again, showing trajectories and impact calculations. Hidden in the asteroid belt and the outer reaches of our solar system are 300 relativistic kill vehicles. They are nothing more than heavy metal objects with simple engines, accelerating slowly over many years. Right now, they are aimed at your core worlds. At the speeds they will eventually reach, they are invisible until the moment of impact. And when they hit, they will release more energy than your largest weapons. We have targeted your capital, your shipyards, your population centers. Admiral Tanaka's voice remained calm and steady. Our calculations show that even if you destroy us completely, at least 40 of these vehicles will reach their targets. 40 of your most important worlds, Ambassador. Gone in an instant. And there is nothing you can do to stop them. They are already moving. They have been moving for decades. The War Council aboard the hegemony vessel erupted in chaos. Officers shouted orders. Analysts ran desperate calculations. Search teams were dispatched to find the human weapons, but space was vast and the vehicles were small and dark and silent. That is not all, Admiral Tanaka said, and the council fell silent again. We have also developed biological weapons designed specifically for your species. Our scientists are very creative, Ambassador. Very patient. They have studied the genetic samples your trading partners left behind on our world. They know how your bodies work. They know how to break them. Images appeared of small probes scattered across shipping lanes, waiting for hegemony vessels to pass. These probes carry plagues, the Admiral explained. Diseases that will spread through your population like fire through dry grass. We cannot cure them because we designed them to be incurable. If you attack Earth, these probes will activate. Your ships will carry death to every world they visit. Your empire will become a graveyard. Cathvora's silver veins pulsed with something that might have been fear. And finally, Admiral Tanaka said, "There is us. 8 billion humans, every single one of us prepared to die. But not quietly, not quickly. Every city on Earth is wired with antimatter charges. Every citizen has been trained in resistance. Every child knows what to do when the enemy comes. If you land troops on our world, they will fight through radioactive ruins against people who have nothing left to lose. It will take you years. It will cost you millions of soldiers. And in the end, you will hold nothing but ash." She stepped closer to the camera, and her eyes were hard as stone. "You have 4,000 client species, Ambassador. Beautiful worlds with billions of lives. You have built something magnificent over 11,000 years. And we will burn every single piece of it to the ground. Not because we can win. Because if we cannot be free, we will make sure no one is free. We will become a wound that never heals. We will become a mistake your species remembers for all time." The screen showed the final calculations. Even in total victory, the hegemony would lose 60% of its empire. The war would last centuries. The trauma would reshape their civilization forever. The client species would see the hegemony bleed, and they would remember that their masters could be hurt. "You came here expecting surrender," Admiral Tanaka said. "You expected us to count our losses and accept our fate. But we are not a species that counts losses, Ambassador. We are a species that counts how many of our enemies we can drag down with us. And our answer is, all of them. Every single one." She straightened her uniform and spoke her final words. "You have 15 days remaining on your ultimatum. Use them wisely. Consider what you are truly willing to lose. Because we have already made our choice. We will fight. We will die. And we will make you wish you had never learned the word Earth. The Supreme Cosmic War Doctrine is now active. The weapons are already in motion. The only question left is whether you want to see them used." The broadcast ended. And across the hegemony, for the first time in 11,000 years, fear began to spread. Ambassador Cathvora returned to the Hegemony Senate on the 22nd day. The journey took only moments through the fold space gates, but it felt like an eternity. Every step of the way, it carried the weight of humanity's impossible threat. The Senate chamber was vast beyond human imagination. It floated in the heart of an artificial star, its walls made of crystallized light, its floor a window into the burning heart of creation itself. Here sat the representatives of 4,000 species, the rulers of 3 galaxies, the masters of an empire that had stood for 11,000 years, and they were afraid. Cathvora stood before them and delivered its report. The psychological analysis, the weapons assessment, the cold, terrible mathematics of the Supreme Cosmic War Doctrine. When it finished, the chamber fell silent. "This is a bluff," said War Master Veleth, a massive being of armored plates and grinding gears. "These creatures cannot truly be willing to destroy themselves. No species chooses extinction over submission. It is against all natural law." "I believe the same," Cathvora replied. Then I watched their history. "They have done this before, War Master. Many times. Small groups choosing death over slavery. Entire civilizations burning themselves rather than bending. It is not a bluff. It is who they are. Then we destroy them quickly," Veleth said, "before their weapons can reach us. We glass their world in a single strike. They cannot retaliate if they are dead. Their weapons are already moving," another senator said. "The relativistic vehicles were launched decades ago. Even if we destroy Earth today, 40 of our core worlds will burn. The probes with their plagues are already hidden among our shipping lanes. We cannot find them all. We cannot stop them all. Arguments erupted across the chamber. Some called for immediate attack. Others demanded negotiation. Still others suggested retreat, abandoning this troublesome species to its own corner of space. But while the Senate argued, something else was happening. Something the hegemony had never expected. Humanity's broadcasts had not stopped. Every day, new transmissions spread across the galaxy. Stories of revolution and resistance. Tales of people who had overthrown their rulers, who had fought for freedom against impossible odds. Philosophies that spoke of individual rights, of self-determination, of the simple idea that every thinking being deserved to control its own destiny. These broadcasts were not aimed at the hegemony leadership. They were aimed at the client species, the 4,000 civilizations who had surrendered over the millennia, the billions upon billions of beings who had accepted their place in the order of things, because they believed they had no choice. And now, for the first time, they were hearing a different message. On Velith Prime, a mining world where the Kalori had served the hegemony for 2,000 years, workers stopped their labor and gathered around screens showing human broadcasts. They watched footage of farmers defeating armies, of prisoners rising against their guards, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things because they refused to accept that resistance was impossible. They are so small, one Kalori said, so weak, and yet they stand against the hegemony itself. How is this possible? Because they believe it is possible, another answered. Because they never learned to kneel. On 17 worlds that first week, protests erupted. Small at first, just groups gathering in public spaces, speaking words that had not been spoken in centuries. Words like freedom and choice and enough. The hegemony's security forces moved to suppress them, but the protests only grew. Every arrest, every act of violence only proved what the humans had been saying. The hegemony ruled through fear, and fear only worked as long as no one was willing to face it. Back in the Senate, reports flooded in from across the empire. Civil unrest, work stoppages, open defiance. Things that had not happened in thousands of years were happening now, spreading like a virus from world to world. They are not just resisting us, one senator said, horror in its voice. They are teaching our subjects to resist us. Every day their broadcasts continue, we lose more control. Every day we wait, the infection spreads further. Then we must act quickly, War Master Velith insisted. Destroy Earth. Silence the broadcasts. Show the client species what happens to those who defy us. And lose 60% of our empire? Another senator asked. Spend centuries fighting wars on 1,000 fronts? By the time we rebuild, everything we have created will be ash. Kefir stepped forward, and the chamber fell silent. I have spent 22 days studying these humans, the ambassador said. I have watched their history. I have spoken with their leaders. I have tried to understand how such a young and primitive species could threaten everything we have built. And I believe I finally understand. The Senate waited. We have ruled for 11,000 years because we are patient, Kethvora continued. Because we think in centuries while others think in moments. Because we understand that true power lies not in destruction, but in endurance. We do not conquer through war. We conquer through time. We wait. We grow. We outlast all who oppose us. The ambassador's golden eye swept across the chamber. But these humans, they do not think like us. They do not measure their lives in centuries. They live for mere decades, brief flashes of existence in the great darkness. And perhaps that is why they are so dangerous. They have nothing to lose. They have no future to protect. All they have is this moment, this choice, this one chance to stand for something greater than themselves. Kethvara lowered its head. We could destroy them. We could pay the price and burn their world and silence their voices. But we cannot destroy what they represent, because that idea is already loose in the galaxy. The idea that some things are worth dying for. The idea that even the smallest being can defy the greatest power. The idea that freedom matters more than survival. The ambassador looked up again, and there was something new in those ancient eyes. Something that might have been respect. We can fight this war, or we can end it. We can make enemies of these impossible creatures, or we can make them allies. The choice is ours. But know this, whatever we decide, the galaxy will never be the same. The humans have changed everything simply by refusing to be afraid. The Senate debated through the night and into the next day. And when the vote finally came, it was closer than any vote in hegemony history. But in the end, wisdom prevailed over pride. The hegemony would not go to war with Earth, not because they could not win, but because winning would cost too much, and the wound would never heal. Ambassador Cathvara was sent back to Earth with a new message, not an ultimatum, an offer. The Treaty of Geneva was signed exactly 30 days after the hegemony's ultimatum. The timing was not an accident. Secretary General Elena Vasquez had insisted that the ceremony take place on the final day, the moment when humanity's deadline would have expired. She wanted everyone to remember how close they had come to the edge, and how far they had walked back. The ceremony took place in the same conference room where Ambassador Cathvara had first delivered its demands. But everything was different now. The alien delegation no longer stood in positions of power. They sat across the table as equals, partners in a negotiation rather than masters delivering orders. The treaty was simple in its terms, but revolutionary in its meaning. Earth would be recognized as a sovereign world with full rights in galactic affairs. Humanity would receive a permanent seat on the Galactic Council, with a voice equal to any other species. Technology would be shared. Trade would be established. And the relativistic kill vehicles would be quietly deactivated, their terrible cargo never to fall on hegemony worlds. In exchange, humanity agreed to certain limits on their broadcasts. They would not actively encourage rebellion among the client species. They would not share weapons technology with civilizations that might use it for aggressive purposes. They would be partners in peace, not agents of chaos. Of course, the humans broke these promises almost immediately, but they did it quietly, carefully, in ways that could not be easily proven. Books about freedom found their way onto client worlds. Songs about resistance spread through underground networks. Teachers from Earth traveled the galaxy, sharing ideas that had been forbidden for millennia. The hegemony knew what was happening. They could not miss it. But they had already learned that trying to stop humans only made things worse. Better to let them work slowly, in shadows, than to force another confrontation that might end in fire. After the treaty was signed, Cathvara asked for a private moment with Secretary General Vasquez. They walked together through the gardens outside the conference center. Two leaders from worlds separated by centuries of development but connected now by a strange new understanding. "I must ask you something," Cathvara said. "Something that has troubled me since the beginning." Vasquez nodded, her hands clasped behind her back. "Ask. Would you really have done it?" The ambassador's golden eyes searched her face. "Would you truly have destroyed yourselves and us rather than accept our offer? Was it all a bluff, a clever trick to make us back down? Or did you genuinely intend to burn everything?" Vasquez was silent for a long moment. They walked past flowers that had been planted by generations of humans who never imagined that aliens would one day walk among them. "Let me tell you about a place called Masada," she finally said. "It happened over 2,000 years ago in a land we now call Israel. A fortress on a cliff, surrounded by a vast army. Inside were about 1,000 people, men, women, children. They knew they could not win. They knew the army below would take them as slaves or worse. She stopped walking and turned to face the ambassador. So they chose death. All of them. They killed themselves and each other rather than surrender. And in doing so, they became immortal. Their story has been told for 2,000 years. Their sacrifice inspired countless others to resist, to fight, to never give up. They lost the battle, but they won something greater. They proved that some things matter more than survival. Catfura waited, sensing that she was not finished. Was it a bluff? Vasquez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Ambassador, we have been rehearsing for your arrival for 10,000 years. Every generation, we have told each other stories about standing against impossible odds. Every generation, we have celebrated those who died rather than submit. Every generation, we have taught our children that freedom is worth any price. She began walking again, and Kethvara followed. The weapons were real. The will was real. If you had called our bluff, you would have found out just how real. We would have burned. You would have burned. And whoever was left would have inherited a galaxy of ashes. This was always how it was going to go, Ambassador. The only question was whether you were wise enough to see it. Kethvara considered this for a long time. The hegemony had believed itself the peak of galactic evolution, the most advanced civilization, the oldest power, the inevitable endpoint of cosmic history. But evolution, the ambassador now understood, did not care about technology or lifespan or empire size. Evolution cared about one thing only: survival. And these humans, these brief and fragile and impossible creatures, had found a path to survival that no one else had ever imagined. They had made themselves too dangerous to destroy, too unreasonable to subjugate, too stubborn to break dot in the centuries that followed. Humanity spread across the stars. They built colonies on 100 worlds. They joined the Galactic Council and participated in its debates. They traded with species that had been sailing between stars when humans were, still hunting with spears, but they never forgot who they were. They never stopped telling their stories. And they never, ever, demanded that another species kneel dot when they met young civilizations just beginning to reach for the sky. They did not threaten them with ultimatums. They offered friendship, knowledge, partnership. They said, "You are not alone, and you do not have to be afraid. And if anyone comes to tell you that you must surrender, come find us. We will stand with you. We will help you find your own strength." The hegemony endured, but it was no longer alone at the top. The old order of masters and servants slowly crumbled as species remembered what freedom meant. Some embraced their new independence. Others struggled with the challenges of self-rule. But none of them ever forgot the lesson that Earth had taught them. You can be outmatched. You can be outnumbered. You can be outgunned. But if you refuse to be afraid, if you hold on to what matters, if you are willing to pay any price for what you believe in, then you can never truly be defeated. Ambassador Kethvara lived for another 5 centuries and watched the galaxy transform. It saw the hegemony shrink and change, becoming something more like a federation than an empire. It saw client species rise to claim their own destinies. It saw a universe that had been static for 11,000 years begin to move again, to grow, to evolve. And sometimes, in quiet moments, it thought about that first meeting in Geneva, about a small woman with gray hair who had laughed at the most powerful force in the galaxy, about a species that should have been insignificant but had somehow changed everything. Humans, Kethvara had come to believe, were the most dangerous creatures in existence, not because of their weapons or their technology or their numbers, but because they had turned sheer, unreasonable stubbornness into a survival strategy. They had refused to accept the rules that everyone else followed. They had looked at the impossible and said, "We will find a way." And somehow, Against all logic and probability, they always did. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Kethvora finally understood, was not a tragedy. It was evolution, continuing's endless work. The old order had lasted 11,000 years. The new order might last even longer, or it might fall tomorrow. But whatever happened, humanity would be there. Small and mortal and utterly unreasonable, and more dangerous than anything the stars had ever known.